So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm Dara Caponegro. I'm the creative director of Schumacher, and we're here today to discuss Toile. I'm very happy to have the Atlanta design community with us. You're near and dear to our heart. So I don't know how many of you know, but I used to be the editor-in-chief of Veranda magazine. So I've spent a lot of time in Atlanta and I have a lot of friends there, and I absolutely love it. And I appreciate how much you guys appreciate design. So thanks for joining today. Today we're very lucky to have Jill Laserson here. She's a textile guru and she's coming from East Hampton, New York. And Jill and I and the whole Schumacher studio worked together on a Toile collection using her personal collection of antique textiles as the basis for art collection. And some of them are extraordinary because they're dead ringers for the originals, which is very hard to do things the old-fashioned way in the 21st century. And then I think some of them are extraordinary because they are cheeky interpretations of some of Jill's originals. So before we give you a peek at the collection, we wanted to talk to Jill and get a sense of, a sense of her collection, what makes her collect what she collects, and why Toile. So Jill, tell us about your collection and when and how and why you focus on toiles.
All right. Well, toiles are so very special and unique. I collect a variety of historical textiles from the 18th century to the 1400s, embroidery, velvet, silks, some costume. But there's something about Toile. Every time I see my Toile, I notice something new. Toile and 18th century silks were the first two types of textiles that I started to collect 25 years ago. And they tell such a story. You can find beautiful silks with stripes and flowers and, really beautiful. But toiles, I was counting one of the toiles last night preparing for today, and I counted over 45 motifs.
one pattern.
One pattern. And you have to think about the engraver and the designer and the artist who, it would take a year to carve one copper plate with one pattern. So you had to get it right, and you wanted it to be popular for the market and people who are looking for something. And I'm sure everyone listening has heard of Oberkampf and the factory in Jouy. And a lot of people were producing beautiful toiles. I have many of them in my collection. But he did something so special because he was so passionate about the motif, and he took extra care to make it unique and beautiful.
So was he the first person to develop toiles?
No. A lot of people would be surprised too. There's a gentleman in England from the 1700s, Will Sherwin. He started it, if you can believe that. And then later in the 18th century, because I won't bore you with all the laws and the regulations and decrees, another gentleman, Francis Nixon, who is an Irishman, actually made it more commercial and profitable. And Oberkampf himself is from Germany, and he borrowed, shall we say, Nixon's idea and took it to France. Okay. So we've got three men, neither who are French.
That's so interesting.
Who created this French toile de Jouy, which we all think of.
Okay, and did it come out of nowhere? Was it inspired by something from India, or it just was? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they started printing textiles, at least to my latest book that I have, 2,000 years ago in India. The Chinese were doing it, the Egyptians were doing it, and then with the trading companies, the East India Trading Company, Holland, France, and England had their own trade, and they would come from the Coromandel coasts of India, and they would be shipped on these boats, and they would have spices and textiles, and everything was new and exciting. You had cocoa beans, cinnamon, strange things called lemons and these beautiful printed cottons. And the reason why they were so popular was because, can you imagine, without any air conditioning, a hot summer day, and you're wearing this 30 yards of silk with a corset, with your stockings, with your hair. It was so hot and so very uncomfortable. And so the cottons were just perfect for everyone. Everyone wanted them, and there was a rage for them, so much so that Louis XVI and Napoleon later put laws into place because the silk industries were failing. No one was buying silk anymore. And because these textiles came from far away, they were not making a profit. So it was like the Silicon Valley, if you can call it that. Printing cotton made you rich, and everyone was happy, except for the silk manufacturers.
All right, but they figured out how to do it themselves and make money doing it. So there's a relationship between Toile and the royal families, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's starting, well, the location of Jouy en Josas, which is this little hamlet in the city of Versailles. This is where Oberkamp set up his factory, and we don't know if it was deliberate or if it was just good luck, but it was the trail where all the carriages came from Paris to and from Versailles, the courtesans, everyone and anyone, and Marie Antoinette herself. And it was, can you imagine, you're going by slowly because you're not in a vehicle, and you just look out over this lawn where they used to bleach and set the mordants, and it was just beautiful. You know, a lot of the Toile de Jouy that we think of is not what made it so popular. It was these little vignettes, these little small floral prints that everyone liked because you'd wear them for clothing. The larger scenic toiles that we think of, the monochromatic reds and blues, really were never worn on the body. They were just for the beds and curtains and furniture and items like that. Marie Antoinette, if you can believe this, because she was Bavarian herself, she loved the fact that Oberkamp was German and they had that camaraderie, but she would bring her children to the factory for a play date, literally, show the kids how it was made. They'd pick out some fabric. I find that to be really fascinating. I just learned that recently, not that long ago. I thought that was really wonderful. And they had the stamp like, you know, the Queen of England has for royal use. The Versailles gave Oberkamp and the factory at Jouy the royal use stamp of approval, which was also wonderful for Oberkamp. Yeah.
And did people vie over these fabrics?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's what you can't have, you want more. There really were laws put in place that you would be fined, you would be imprisoned if you were caught or seen using it or wearing these items. That's how crazy it was to their economy. But even Madame Pompadour, who is the Sun King's mistress, favorite, mistress, she invested in the campaigns of the trade with India, and she had tons of it. She decorated all of her chateaus with this beautiful thing called Toile de Jouy. And the laws came and went. Oberkamp sold a lot to England and to the United States because it was so tricky in France. Finally, the laws were reversed. Everyone was happy, but it was still very expensive to produce and very expensive to buy. In today's monetary, it would be $600 to $700 a yard.
Wow.
For 1 yard of toile. And if a gown has 12 to 15 yards, a beautiful bed would have 30 to 40 yards. You're talking a Maserati. It's a lot of money.
Right, right. That's fantastic. I learned just yesterday that Indian chintzes were banned from England because they threatened the wool industry. So it was similar, but they could be imported to the US. So the US, you could get Indian chintzes, but you couldn't get them in England for a certain time. So I thought that was really interesting too, similar.
Very interesting. As a matter of fact, over the years, as I've read about toiles, I always find it fascinating to learn that Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Abigail Adams, George Washington, in their memoirs here and there, or their inventories, there will be this copper plate is what they called it then. They didn't call it toile de Jouy until the late 19th century. So it was always called copper plates or prints or Indians, because it looked like the illegal Indians, prints from India. And there's many, many newspapers from Boston and Philadelphia that advertise the sale of printed cottons and so forth. We tried very hard to create our own textile industry, because it's one of the first things you say to yourself is, why were we importing everything from, you know, and they tried. Benjamin Franklin did import John Houston, who was an Englishman, to set up factory, and he did an okay, you know, job, but it wasn't commercial. He couldn't get it going. So everything came from England and France. And exactly, some of the women walking around Williamsburg in the 18th century were wearing more fashionable textiles than the women in France and England, because they were shipping it over to us.
That's fascinating. So what's the difference between, like, are there stylistic differences between French toiles, English toiles? I mean, there are American toiles too.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, when we all think of toiles, we all think of the iconic scenic toiles, typically from France, not just Jouy, but different regions, Nantes, and different places like that. Beautiful toiles. But the French were always 90% botanical. There are exceptions. Old Ford made a beautiful one with the runes and exotic birds and so forth, and pastoral scenes. But for the most part, the British just loved their gardens. They loved the naturalism, even in their fashion. They dressed more low key. Their gardens were not as formal. And you can see that in the textiles. Actually, want me to show you the difference visually?
Yeah,
sure.
That's fine.
This is what I think of as your classic toile. You've got animals, people resting by the river, taking their lunch break, relaxing. And then the English are more like this. This delicate arborescent, the birds, everything's lighter, and it's more about nature.
So that's one of the patterns from our collection, which we'll show you in a minute. It's so beautiful. All right, and then tell us about color. I think one of the big surprising things about toile is the colors that it was made in, particularly purple, was sort of a classic color for toile, right?
Yeah, but even more rare. You know, red was the most common, and in order, I find blue to be the second most red. Yeah, and then amaranth, they called it, this strange shade of purple. It has it's more like this color here. It's purple, but it's not purple, if that makes sense. And a sepia color, which was brown.
Yeah.
And to get the backgrounds white was quite a chore. Days and weeks, especially in the summertime, it went faster, but you can imagine the rest of the year. It was so complicated. It's remarkable, but I won't bore you with all of that. It's really the patterns that attract me to toile. But I find it fascinating that this is also a toile. This is considered a toile. And this is a toile. This is manufactured in Jouy. And this is a toile. And it surprises a lot of people who really aren't that familiar with toile.
So what is the definition of a toile exactly?
Toile is a word for fabric. Simple as that. Jouy is the place it was manufactured.
Okay.
And like anything, it was just common knowledge. Oberkampf was sort of the rock star of the toile world, and renowned everywhere. And so the Toile de Juillet, fabric of this place called Juillet. And I don't know how the English feel about that, because they produce some remarkable toiles that are very hard to find, very collectible. But it's just a term like anything else. After 200-300 years, it becomes something.
Okay, but is it always cotton?
Is it? No. In the beginning, it was cotton and linen, Simoise. It's more nubbier. And Oberkampf did not like that, nor did the other manufacturers, but it was what they could get. And you can tell an earlier toile if it is on this mix of fabric.
That's so cool. You're so full of fun facts.
Yeah, this, if you can see it, it's a little nubbier. And then the later toiles are much more smoother and cleaner and much easier to dye.
I see. Fascinating. Okay, so now we're going to launch into the toiles that we did together for Schumacher, which just launched, I think, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that we really set out to do was to make toile, you know, to celebrate its heritage and legacy, but also to bring it to the future. So do you mind showing the original document that this wallpaper came from?
Yes. I didn't pull out my larger piece because it's cumbersome, but this is one of my favorite toiles. I was so happy that you chose this one. Can you see that okay?
Yep, it's perfect.
It's grand. It's large for a toile. So I love the fact that it got super enlarged for this.
And larger. So we took the one motif, this it's Apollo, right? On a chariot with zephyrs, which are symbols of the wind. And we blew it up so that it's actually a wallpaper panel that's 12 feet tall and I think more than 12 feet wide, but maybe it's 12 feet wide. So it's really like an unbelievably dramatic interpretation of a toile. There we have it in our in the D&D building in New York, just so you have a sense of scale. But what drew me to this was not Apollo, but the women. Like, I find the women to be so intriguing and alluring, and I love how strong they are and how powerful and graceful at the same time. So what's the history of this particular toile?
This toile was produced 3 or 4 years before the French Revolution, and you'll see with the collection it does stand out more so than the others, and the fact that it's more figural and there isn't this tight background of pattern. I think this is what they say, the last breath of the Ancien Regime. This was when times were still pretty good. Everyone was sort of enjoying that, what we think of as this 18th century crazy life. This is from Nantes, Petit Pierre. I think this is just outstanding. I have a lot of toiles, but this is one of my favorite. The movement, you can almost hear like the flight of the Valkyries when you look at it.
Yeah.
And when you all enlarged it, I thought it was remarkable. And the first thing I thought of was, wow, can you imagine Oberkampf himself walking into a room today and seeing this huge toile? I mean, it would knock anyone's socks off.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I just think in the right space, it has so much presence. You know, you almost don't need much more. And then let's talk about these for a second.
Yeah. Well, we all recognize Botticelli's Primavera, and there is a zephyr is represented in this, a spring tossing her flowers. So I like to think, see, even in the Renaissance, they were influenced by Greek and Roman mythology. And towards the end of the 18th century, when the French Revolution was just starting to happen, you know, this was neoclassicism. They changed and switched over more to classicism because it had a different vibe and a feeling, just like the period in time. The Bottega Veneta, this is, I believe, someone has to, I couldn't find out the date or the year of this, but it's not that distant. I just love it because of the movement of these dresses. You can really see the similarity and how much fun it would be to wear that. even Jacqueline Onassis, there's pictures of her as First Lady wearing Grecian style clothes. And I can always picture Grace Kelly in that beautiful white dress that she wore. And then the marble statue is from the 4th century BC. And this is the daughter of Zeus. And she's wearing what they call a peplos. And, you know, you can think of Mary McFadden, you can think of so many designers in the past who have embraced the draping and that whole vibe.
Right. And you love making these connections. You have a piece for us on our blog where you talk about, you know, how motifs live on from you know, time to time to time, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're not even discussing interior design here, but they do go hand in hand. Decorative arts, beauty, and themes that oftentimes come back again and again, but they get interpreted in a different way. And that's what makes it so fun.
Yeah. Okay. So next is Les Losanges. So this is a pattern that is both a fabric and a wall covering. Do you have the original of this that you can share?
I sure do. This is, again, a smaller piece, but I love this because it's that purple color that we were talking about.
So what we did, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I say it's fascinating that your brilliant designer could just see the beauty in just in the pattern of the background, the lozenges.
Right.
Really,
yeah, the motifs. Actually, Annie, do you mind scrolling back a couple of frames, because you in the window of the D&D building you can see it upholstered on a chair.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we cleaned it up for the contemporary market. The original we thought was beautiful too, but it's just a new interpretation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think it's brilliant, and it's classic. Yeah, if you look back at, yes, this beautiful mosaic on the right, could it just be any more true to what this was designed by a man named Huet. He was famous for his designs. It's almost identical to the mosaic.
So when was the mosaic made and when was the toile made?
The mosaic was made in the mid-1st century, so just a few years ago. And this mosaic is found in Rome.
Okay.
It just blows my mind how wonderful that is.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And toile is from when?
Right, just yeah. And then the chair was in Marie Antoinette's dairy that she had, this beautiful, you know, she had many playhouses, and this was her dairy. And I personally was surprised when I learned this also, because this to me just seems so Napoleon, so Josephine, so post-revolution. But the goût grec was this trend that, you know, the upper echelons of people strived for, because they always had to change it up. And I really find that striking that this was in Marie Antoinette's time period and that she loved it.
Yeah.
So that's, again, you know, the dates. And then this beautiful dress, this cotton printed gown. I believe this is from Jouy. There's an image of Oberkampf standing with a piece of draped cotton that he had produced, and it's the same pattern. And that color was starting to come in to vogue. I just can imagine how happy this lady is wearing that cotton dress and not her heavy silks.
Yeah, yeah. It's so incredible to see the thread.
Yeah,
all right.
And here's a tidbit too. I think it's also very interesting is Marie Antoinette loved toile. She loved the floral toiles and the figural toiles. And in her Hamlets and in her little Petit Trianon, she would line the toiles with satin, with silk. Now that's something I would never think of.
Right, right. Interesting.
Yeah, I guess she had to glam it up a little bit.
Yeah, cool. Okay, what's next, Annie? All right, so this we're calling Lisen Contemporane, and it also is a fabric and a wallpaper. And this is a little bit of a surprise because let's look at the original first.
This again is in a shade of purple. It's quilted also, which was very common back then because it would add warmth. But it's just incredible, the original.
And is one French? This one's French.
This is French. This is also Oberkampf, and it was designed by Huet also. Because if you're collecting toile, it's always nice to have something designed by him because he was the master, I think. He was trained as an artist.
So what we decided to do here is add some contemporary motifs that are rather surprising, and you almost aren't aware of them if you first glance at it. But if you really study it, you can see that there's a figure carrying a takeout coffee cup, and there's a jean jacket, and there are earphones, and there are earbuds, and there's a selfie stick. So there are a lot of fun. There's the jean jacket, and the woman there, I don't know if she's a goddess or what, but she's wearing combat boots, and she's on a computer, a laptop. Let's see, what else do we have? You can see this other figure. She has a selfie stick, and instead of having lions, I think the original has lions, right?
Yes. Yep.
Some dogs in there. There's a figure that has a beanie cap. So it's kind of a fun, whimsical pattern. I mean, we're so excited about it because we think it's subtle enough. It's not screaming, and it's just a joy. It's a little bit of a Where's Waldo game.
Exactly. Where's Waldo? I love that. Can you imagine you're lying in bed, or your child is, and the entire bed is canopied with this fabric, and you're counting, like counting sheep. You're counting little things you can find.
Right. And then this was photographed at your house, your beautiful house. And
I recognize
that. We did a photo shoot there for our next issue of our magazine called The Bulletin. And Jill was nice enough to open her home. And here you see it on placemats and as napkins. And Annie, if you go one more, there you can really see the detail of the placemat. So also a conversation starter at dinner, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And that comes in 3 colors, and it also comes as a wallpaper, as I said. All right, Jill, so talk about these images.
Well, we have the classic David Webb bracelet bangle of the horse. And you can see this is a timeless motif, the shell motif or the scale motif, whatever you want to call it. And I find myself, no matter where I go, I will always find it someplace, somewhere, in a museum or in a fashion magazine or classic David Webb. The jacket is contemporary. It was in a catalog that arrived in my mailbox a month ago. The urn, we were in Greece 2 years ago, and I snapped that photo of that image. That goes back to 1100 to 1700 Troy, BC.
Wow. Wow. So these patterns, they have staying power for sure.
I know. And then the David Webb, I mean, gosh, that goes back to the 60s.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
I just pulled those out. Those were fun.
Next,
and this is the wall that has over 40 details of motifs in it, characters and motifs.
And what I love is that our studio was able to get the exact feel of it right. You know what I mean? Like those things are seamless. Like the style of the engraving and the drawing is exactly the same as the original. I think that's what makes it so fun.
Well, even down to the boo-boo. You'll see where the scales don't line up. That's just by the nature of printing, which I think that's fantastic. I like those.
Yeah. All right. Next is Toile de la Prairie. So this is the one that you gave us a glimpse of a few minutes ago, and this is English. What I loved about this was the butterflies and the flowers. I just think they're so delicate and beautiful. So this is English, and it dates to what? Oh, so
this is English. This is 1770s, early 1780s. So that's pretty rare. My piece is a bit faded, but that's okay. I love the green, this color. It's so gorgeous. I'm going to use that in a project that I'm working on. I just love it. And that exotic bird. Here again with the English, it's again, they would look at these books that were coming to them from all these travelers, and these illustrators would take these trips. and would sketch the birds, the fauna, the flowers and everything, and a little bit of chinoiserie going on in here, which I also love. I just think it's precious. I love it.
That this is really a real bird, right? It could be an amalgam of other birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe so, because, you know, they would travel to exotic places, the Asian, and this would be a bird. This would be an authentic bird, nothing morphed, I don't think.
I see. Okay. Okay. So, oh, we have
Bromley Hall.
Yeah.
Was. Yeah, the manufacturer of that was Bromley Hall in England.
You want to talk about these for a second?
Sure. I mean, they speak for themselves, but I would love to be able to collect costume. It's so prohibitively expensive, very difficult to store. I'm not a museum, but I do have fragments of gowns like this. And again, this was worn and used in America. I just love it. It must have changed their lives so tremendously. It could be washed. It didn't fade. These don't survive as often as silk gowns. You would think the silks would survive, or that these would survive more because they would buy more of these because silks were precious, but these would be worn and worn. When they got tattered and threadbare, and they were made into littler clothes for their children. You know, they just got whittled away, but they still saved them. And when you look closely at these 18th century pieces, you'll see darning. And, you know, these were wealthy people who could afford these, and they took such great care. Oftentimes, I mean, there's Thomas Jefferson would send his printed copper plates to be repaired and mended. They never just got rid of it, or they'd patch over it.
Refreshing, right?
Yeah, and this, I believe, is in Colonial Williamsburg's collection.
Cool. All right, what's next? Oh, here it is also at your house on this beautiful antique bench.
I know, that's pretty. It was such a great idea, I thought.
And this is Toile Tropique. So this is also a wallpaper in a fabric, gorgeous purple color. You want to tell us about this one? Oh, let's see the original first. I mean,
There's a butterfly there. Do you see your butterfly?
Yes. It's a head ringer for the original.
Yeah, this is so fine. It is, again, this was done in England. Again, very nature. They did it the best, I think. And this would have been very modern when it was produced in the late 18th century. Very modern. And then today you'll see the same patterns repeated again, you know. And the color, I love the color that everyone chose for that. That's beautiful.
Beautiful. Here it is again in your house as your sink skirt. So pretty.
In the scullery. It's great.
Yeah. Beautiful. And then here you can see a bunch of the patterns. There's Toile Tropique. There's Toile de la Prairie in the brown. Beautiful house. I love your house. It's so.
You're sweet. Oh, thank you.
I just like, it's like a new house that looks like it's been around forever. I just love it.
Well, that's a big compliment, because that's what we were going for. It's our year-round home. The beautiful thing about Toile Tropique is it looks beautiful flat, as in a wallpaper, or on the skirt even. That's not the exact, but as you can see with my kitchen sink, it's a beautiful pattern when it is curtained also. You're right, you're not losing a lot of it. It's so pretty.
Yeah, so they don't have palm trees in England, I don't think. So why do you think they did that?
Again, it was the age of exploration. It was the age of exploration. I mean, if you ever read a Jane Austen novel, they would actually rent out pineapples if someone was having a grand dinner party, because they wanted to show off this weird thing. And palms and palm trees were very exotic and odd. And so they would bring a little bit of exoticism to their homes I think it's great. And all these illustrators, they really did. I've got names of them if you want, but Jacques Charton and different ones, they would travel literally on these ships. And Captain James Cook, same thing. They were hired to come on the boat to basically take pictures of all of the new things that they were discovering.
So cool. Really cool. All right, so we have two more. We have tapes, which I did not really realize existed back in the day. So this one is Suzette tape, and it's a printed tape. It's one of my favorites. It comes in beautiful colors there. That's the original.
Yeah. They call this Prussian blue. And the dyes indigo usually came from India. And it got so prohibitively expensive, and India was starting to an embargo their dye. So Napoleon, around 1810, I believe, he offered a $25,000 prize, 25,000 francs, for anyone who can invent a method of making blue for France.
Wow.
Prussian blue. So this is what it is.
Wow, incredible.
And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this is just an example of how the borders would be used on an original toile.
Oh, that's so chic.
See how isn't that chic?
Yeah, incredible. Yeah.
And they were actually used on some clothing, but mostly for furnishings.
And here it is in your house. We used it on a pillow as a border of a pillow. So pretty.
Yeah, inspiring.
Yeah. And then the last one is Yvonne tape. And do you have the original of that?
I certainly do. This is very faded, but it's still quite amazing. But prepare yourself for this.
Oh, wow.
This is from the early 1800s. And look how brilliant the colors are.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. I love this. It's got this classic acanthus, the palmettes, the rosettes, classic straight classicism. There's nothing neoclassic about these.
Yeah.
And I saw an image of Napoleon himself wearing some at his neckline.
Oh, can you bring that a little closer?
Oh yeah, a little symbolic.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. So what we tried to do at Schumacher with these is that they're not printed on a white ground. You know, we tried to dull them down a little bit so they had more of an antique feel. Mm-hmm. I would love to see that in a room, you know, as the border along the cornice or something. I just think that so
This doesn't come in a paper, does it? It's just fabric, but
it's just fabric, yeah.
But that'd be great. You can paperback that, can't you? Or...
Yeah, you could actually, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think you could even just glue it you could probably just glue it onto a wall. All right, well, I think you've really demonstrated why toile has such staying power, and we're gonna open our little panel today up to questions. So I have some questions. So Jane Cumming, who is our manager in Atlanta in the Southeast, she said, we just added a portion of this in the Atlanta Schumacher showroom for those who would like to come see it. So I hope you'll do that. And then we have a question. Can you explain what chinoiserie is? I only know of it as white and other color printed Chinese and French countryside image. I don't even know how to spell it.
Chinoiserie. Personally, it's one of I collect chinoiserie textiles in silk and in printed toiles. It is, again, this is a time period where we weren't traveling, we didn't have photographs, books were still pretty rare, and the Orient, whether it be, you know, China, India, Turkey, Egypt, was mystifying. And so it's sort of a hybrid of English sensibility and your Western European sensibility intermixed with what the Europeans imagined Asia and the exotic to be. Pagodas and sort of odd shaped exotic plants and motifs, and yeah, chinoiserie. It's a great word, I think, because it just sort of sums up the blur of Western sensibilities with exotic.
Yeah. So it's really about the motif, you know, like yeah, okay. So we have a comment. This is a fascinating discussion. Jill, you are so knowledgeable and interesting. What a collection you have. Wonderful. It's nice. Thank you. That's from Bonnie.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, and then somebody said that there's a fidget spinner in that Toile Contemporane. There is. I couldn't remember the name for what it was called. So thank you, Lisa. This is from Linda. I have a Toile fragment that I think might be from the late 18th or 19th century. Would Jill be able to help try to identify it for me?
With pleasure. With pleasure. I've collected every book that I know on Toile because that's a really wonderful way of identifying them, and you always want to be right. I would be happy to do that.
So let's see. I guess the best thing to do would be to email me, and then I could put you in touch. So my email address is dcapongro@fsco.com. F as in Frank, sco.com. All right. Jill, what inspired you to go so deep in such a beautiful yet niche genre? Have really enjoyed learning so much today.
Oh boy, what inspires me? It's hard. My family wonders the same thing. From a very young age, I've been fascinated with textiles, but not just textiles. I really don't have the passion for how they were woven and the warps, the webs, and all that equipment, but I do love motifs and pattern. I find it fascinating. It takes you down this curvy road of history. I'm not particular to just Toile, as I've said earlier, but I really find Toile to be delightful and unique, and I'm still collecting. I've been collecting for 25 years. Very lucky, I feel. And there's about 8 or 9 patterns out there that I do not have, and it's making me mad. So I'm still looking, but I am proud to say that I have 200 that are identified from Juilliard-Jossas. And the English toiles are very hard to find. I don't know why, but I've got about 14 of those, but I'm always looking.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said that one of the reasons you went is because your husband would go to France on business a lot and you would entertain yourself during the day, right? That's how you
Yeah, he'd be gone from breakfast to dinner, basically. So what's a girl to do? So
shopping clothes, but you shop Toile.
Yeah, one thing I haven't done yet, which I'm wanting to do, is because you gain confidence as you get older with shopping and your knowledge and so forth. I used to always go to the flea market. Now I'm lucky because I've got established dealers that I work with. But there's an auction house in Paris, and I've always have wanted to go, but I choke up when I get nervous with my French, and I can only imagine what I'd come home with. But eBay is a very good source, actually.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. So someone was wondering if you could share some resources, books or websites where they can learn more about Toile.
Yeah, I am in the process of putting something together because I'm asked that a lot. I have a lot of books on Toile. I could make a list of them, but there's a few that are musts. You must have. The one is, actually I'm looking at it right now to heighten up my phone. Printed Textiles, English and American Cottons and Linens by Montgomery. It's a classic. I have used this book over and over and over again. It's expensive because it's out of print, but Linda Eaton, who worked with Montgomery, she came out with a new edition to it, which is available. It's very good also. And then, yeah, 12 is really, what's that?
Do you share the cover? Do you have it in front of you or no?
Yeah, I have to move my phone though, because I actually piled up books.
Okay. You know what? We can, Annie,
I'll send them.
Yeah, maybe you can send them to me.
Or I could put them on the website. Or
okay. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, lots.
So what was the other book? I'm sorry.
Toile de Jouy, Printed Textiles in the Classic French Style. And then another one is Printed French Fabrics, Toiles de Jouy. And our museums have, thankfully, really good collections. The Victoria and Albert is mind-blowing. Obviously, there's a museum in Juilliard-Jossas. And in our country, Philadelphia, the Met, Cleveland, Chicago, LACMA, that's just to name a few. Cooper Hewitt's got a wonderful collection. The only problem is, and this is where I'm very fortunate, is that my girls come out more than the museums. You have to make an appointment. They really want to know, is it scholastic research you're doing, blah, 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 blah. And because of the fragility of textiles, they generally are not displayed frequently. And if they are, for a very short time. So if anyone really truly has an interest and a passion, they can contact me if they want just to get a good idea in what they look like in person. You can touch them and have more access to them.
All right, here's one more question. Please talk about some toile motif crossovers and interpretations to other mediums, ceramics, papers, etc.
Well, just that. So, one thing I learned from a wonderful friend of mine, Melinda Watt, she was with the Met. She said something to me, and she's so true. Pottery, porcelain, Chinese export goods, saucers, coffee cups, jugs, have a lot of this almost exact motifs, and then it helps you date, and it helps you find the designer who patterned it. Furniture, if you look at Josephine's home, Malmaison, her cabinet maker used so many of the motifs like this, and on and on and on. And fashion mimics also. And just any book on ornament will show you everything. But yeah, it's true. Different furniture, architecture, believe it or not. If you go to the Pantheon, you'll see everything there. And paintings, the frames on paintings, wood.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
One of the things that I found really intriguing, I was in Italy a couple of years ago in Caserta, and I shot the palace there for the Bulletin. And that was created, I guess, in the late 1700s. And they had just discovered Pompeii, and they were unearthing Pompeii. And there was a whole rebirth of classicism, which I think some of these patterns that we brought back, are dated around the same time, right? And sort of share that same root of like, oh my God, this place is incredible. But, it hadn't been seen the light of day for so many years, and all of it was brought back.
It's unbelievable. Just recently this year in someplace in England, they discovered a gorgeous, beautifully preserved mosaic floor from when the Romans were there. It's unbelievable, really. Can you imagine in the 18th century seeing all of this and thinking how sophisticated we all are? All that they had.
Yeah, incredible.
And even in the Renaissance, they did too. They had discovered some runes, and they also, if you go back to the 14 and 1500s, you'll see the classicism then also.
That's cool.
Then you had Rococo and all that stuff in between, and then it goes back again to classicism.
Yeah, so true. It's so true. All right. Well, this was amazing. Thank you for sharing your collection with us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. We're so thrilled. And I'm
thanking you for having an interest in my collection.
Yeah, we're really thrilled. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, Dara.
Bye-bye.